And one thing that we're going to think about today is how a happy client is a kept client. All right, a happy client is a kept client. If we're always chasing new leads but forgetting about our existing ones, then we're always going to be starting our business over from the ground up. And that's not a very system-minded way to run a business, right? So what we're going to be covering during the summit, number one, is messaging for clients for life, which we're going to start with today. We're going to start with crafting messaging that resonates and builds long-term loyalty. And then we're going to have a coffee break. And then after that, we're going to get into creating a wow client experience. And then we're going to be talking about database marketing for year-round connection. Okay. But just remember that as we're talking about these different principles, the key to achieving this kind of sense of consistency and doing it really well, it's going to be through systems, workflows, and SOPs so that we can really make sure that every client feels incredibly well valued. Okay. So in session one, let's talk about what mindsets we need to be focusing on. Because our mindset is going to inspire our actions, right? If we think about those stories that we hear before we get into real estate, there's always like those really beautiful, heartwarming stories about like that first-time home buyer buying their first home and imagining buying a dog who can be, or rescuing a dog who can be hanging out in the backyard, bringing home their newborn, right? Like just like the quintessential American dream of the family in the home, right? And I think everyone in this room has experienced the power of ownership and how that can empower our clients to leave something for their kids when they leave, or be able to set themselves up in a more secure position in life, give themselves a foundation on which to grow from. Right? And we have to really take that seriously. And I know that you do, but it's always a good moment just to remember that. And often the first mindset that comes to mind when I'm thinking of those moments is abundance. It's the abundance mindset. It's understanding that these moments and these life moves are greater than just opening a door or putting a sign in the yard. Right? And we can have that abundance mindset guide us into how we are truly meeting our clients at their level and pouring what we can into their experience so that we can honor the fact that this is not just a transaction for most people. This is a major move in their lives, right? And it's what a privilege that we get to have a moment to walk through that journey with them. And so what I want to do is explore the 4 most powerful mindsets that are going to guide us through the client experience. And the first one is abundance. And I want to take a moment and just recognize that you do have the resources and you have the energy and you do have the creativity to deliver extraordinary moments to your clients. And I want you to raise your hand right now if you felt this year that you didn't. That you didn't have the resources, you didn't have the creativity, you didn't have the energy. It can feel that way. And those feelings can ebb and flows. But what we have to do is remember that resources, energy, motivation, creativity, that stuff will ebb and wane. But the mindset that is going to guide us even through those lower moments is going to be abundance. And so let's just take a moment and start by listing 3 ways that you can go above and beyond for your clients' interactions. And these might be just ways that you have already done that this year, that you already go above and beyond, that you make a point to do. And kind of think about how you are thinking big when it comes to how you support your clients and surprise them. This might be like sending unexpected gifts, sharing local tips tailored to their interests, or offering specific recommendations or resources during the transaction. Showing up on someone's moving day to help them carry things into the house is not a big thing, but it's these little moments that we can decide we have the time, we have the resources to just go that extra step further and be in it with them during that process, right? Let's look at mindset number 2. Mindset number 2 is clarity. And we talk a great deal about this in Market Authority, having clarity on the ideal client, understanding where they're at, what they are struggling with, what they need a little extra help with. When it comes to clarity, it allows you to focus on what matters most. And it also is the gift of taking the focus off of what you need and instead putting it on what the client needs. And I think a lot of us naturally are more inclined to help others and look outside of ourselves. But this interesting thing happens when we create a business. It is a reflection of who we are. When we're in the trenches building a business, trying to develop a brand, trying to put ourselves out there, it is such an intensely vulnerable moment. It is an incredibly vulnerable thing to create a business. You're putting yourself out there and you're asking the world to judge you and say, yes, you're worth it, or no, you're not. And that's a really challenging thing to do. And so we kind of can get into fight or flight mode a little bit when that happens, because we are so focused on how we are being perceived or received. And when we have clarity on the ideal client, it gives us something to shift that energy towards, which is why we spend so much time on that. It allows us to get out of transaction mode, scarcity mode. It allows us to get outside of the details of the process. And again, remember that this is a human being going through a very human experience. And I want you to kind of think about your ideal client profile and ask yourself, what specific problem does your service solve for your ideal clients? We've heard some really great stories so far, and we've heard some really great examples of what we're doing to make those stories happen. But if you were to put a word on it, and again, looking back to the brand builder, this is why I wanted you guys to kind of go through that a little bit and like look back on that process. When we're thinking about our ideal client, what specifically are we solving for them? We're not just there to like facilitate putting a sign in the yard. Sometimes we are. And sometimes that is the best service, because we can like get it in, list it on the MLS, get them going. But how are you going to provide a solution in a way that's unique to you? This is what guides our messaging, having clarity on that topic. Having the patience to learn enough about your client to then guide them on the right areas that they might need in this instance in a relocation. But think about your market, right? Like, what about your market has those like quirky specific things that tend to trip up your clients? And think about like maybe how you can anticipate that a little bit and provide clarity so that it's something that they're ready to overcome. And if you guys probably saw, if you're not from here, you saw when you were coming in, this is a sprawling metro. Absolutely enormous. You can drive an hour each way and not leave town, you know? And so there's a lot of different areas. And so we recognize here as Phoenix agents that like we have to have clarity on who the individual is and what's most important for them to then help them make the best decision for their family. And that requires things like having materials, things like having resources that are ready to go for them, but also just having the care to get clarity on what their needs are. It's amazing. One way that I like to think of us as real estate agents is like, we're not going to be like the person pushing them off a cliff. We're like the bumpers, you know, as they're going through, and just kind of reminding them which lane they need to stay in, you know, according to what their needs are. And of course, they can decide to change lanes if the situation changes. And then again, we're just showing them what that looks like and which way is straight, right, in that situation. Let's talk about the next mindset, ownership. I'm already hearing so much ownership in this room right now. These examples and these stories show me that you are taking a moment to get into the trenches with your clients and be there with them. That is taking ownership. And I think it's important that we put a word on it so that we understand specifically what we're doing when we have this approach, and that we understand the value that ownership can provide. Ownership is really about taking responsibility for the entire client journey. It's about taking a moment to think about it from start to finish and understanding how you can have an active part in every single step of this transaction, right? It means being proactive. It means anticipating needs before they arise. I'm hearing a lot of that already. And if you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, I want you to see that as like a sign of you being on the right track. Because even when it feels like the results don't come as a result of like really putting in all this work and living these mindsets, you are on the right track. You are doing the right thing. You are on the right place. You need to stay the course. So let's talk about ownership a little bit. And I want you to think about the moments that matter in a transaction. We're going to go into this even more in depth later today. And this is a great precursor to what's to come, I feel like. But the moments that matter in the transaction are the points where you can really step up and make an impression, whether it's from the initial consultation to closing day, thinking about how we can really take ownership of each moment. So we have our last mindset, and then we're going to pause for a break, and we're talking about impact. Impact is how we're going to focus on the purpose behind what you do and the positive impact that you create. So purpose-driven work is going to resonate on a deeper level. Okay, I feel like impact is the result of all of this effort that we're putting in as we're living these, like the 3 mindsets leading up to this. But when you operate from a place of impact, you're not just focused on the transaction, but on building a legacy of relationships and meaningful experiences. So I want to kind of think a little bit about why, and this is on the brand builder, your why. A lot of times your why will reflect in your impact and vice versa. I want to think about how your work positively impacts your clients and their families and your community. And like Tawander's story earlier with your 90-year-old homeowners, like amazing. Like that is such a great example. I want to think about your experiences with that as well. I want to think about how your service is creating that impact, and think about your why and see if there's a connection there. And when you put these together, you can see how it guides our decision making, it guides our actions, it guides our communication and how we speak with others. And I think that it's really helpful to just put a word to it, you know, be able to call it out for what it is and have that vocabulary. Which of these mindsets resonates with you the most strongly? Where do you see the opportunities to practice in these? I think that we've come up with a lot of different ideas together, and how adopting these mindsets can help you stand out in a crowded market.